G'day guys, welcome to Legal Studies, having a look at formal statements of human rights. So, as a bit of a background, the development of international rights can be traced through two key areas. The first area is international customary law, which is defined as those customs that the majority of the world's nations accept as being lawful. The second area is treaties. Treaties are voluntarily international agreements that bind signatory nations to certain behaviours. So you need to keep these in mind as we go through the next three big declarations. So the first of those is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, or the UDHR. That was formed in 1948 and was developed largely as a response to the barbarity of the World War II. It affirms the promotion of universal respect and observance of human rights and the dignity and worth of the person. The declaration was to be a common standard for every single individual and every organ of society, that means every area of society, to keep in mind. At the core of the declaration was non-discrimination and respect for the individual dignity of every person. During its drafting, there were a number of debates, including the importance of cultural and other factors in the context of rights, the connection between rights and responsibilities, and the role of spiritual values in the welfare of the individual. So you know, the declaration consists of 30 articles. I'm not going to go through all 30, I'm just going to group them together. Article 1. It asserts the right of all people to freedom and equality in dignity and rights. Article 2. I said I will group them together. I know it sounds like I'm going through them individually, but stay tuned. Article 2 prohibits discrimination on the grounds of race, colour, sex, language, religion, political or social origin, property, birth, or other status. Articles 3 to 21. Told you I'd group them. Outline civil and political rights, including the right to participate in the government. Every person has the right to life, liberty and security, freedom of movement, thought, conscience, and religion, as well as freedom of association and the right to participate in the government through genuinely free elections. Articles 22 to 30 detail economic, social, and cultural rights, such as the rights of people to work, to join trade unions, and to participate freely in their cultural rights in their communities. The lack of legal status of the Declaration has helped to give it a moral authority. For example, the condemnation by the UN of racist regimes in South Africa and Zimbabwe over the last decade. It has made it flexible enough to help ground demands for increased human rights, even against authoritarian governments. Think of North Korea and how that's been working or not working. It has also served as a foundation for later instruments such as the International Convention on Social, Economic and Cultural Rights, and the development of similar rights in national constitutions and domestic legal systems. Now, technically, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is not legally binding. However, the rights are so widely accepted that they may have become part of the general principles of international law, even though they may not be part of customary international law. Now, moving on. The International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, or the ICCPR. We like a good abbreviation. Now, the ICCPR states that civil and political rights relate to the treatment of the individual, both as an individual and as a member of a wider society. Their main function is to protect people from the actions of oppressive governments. In the ICCPR, all parties agreed to respect all individual rights established under the Covenant. These effectively expand on many of the rights set out in the UDHR. So the key rights provided by the ICCPR include the right to life, freedom from torture and slavery, freedom of thought, conscience and religion, the prohibition of war propaganda and the prohibition of advocacy of racial hatred, freedom of assembly and association only limited by the needs of a democratic society, democratic rights of participation in government, the rights of minorities to enjoy their culture, profess and practice their religion and use of their own language. And I know this is a bit of an old stat, but as of 2007, 160 countries were signatories to the convention. But even so, the rights enshrined there are widely abused. So that means there are still a lot of countries that abuse those rights. Moving on again. The International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. Key features of this covenant include equal rights for men and women, the right to work in jobs that are freely chosen or accepted, the right to remuneration, that means money, that allows a decent living with safe and healthy working conditions, as well as rest and leisure, some of my favourites, with a reasonable limit to working hours. The right to form and join trade unions for the protection of workers' social and economic interests, including the right to strike, limited only by laws necessary for a democratic society. The right to social security, the wide possible support for the family and dependent children with the marriage by free consent and children's work not to harm their health or morals. The right of everyone to an adequate standard of living, including adequate food, housing, clothing, continuous improvement of living standards, and the fundamental right to freedom from hunger. The right to the highest standards of physical and mental aid. The right to education for the full development of the human personality and sense of dignity, and to encourage friendship amongst all racial, ethnic, and religious groups. The right of everyone to the benefits of cultural life and scientific progress. Now, all state parties are required to report on the measures adopted to bring about the fulfillment of these rights. So that means what have individual states, countries done to ensure that these rights are being adhered to or working towards achieving them. So a couple of questions I want you guys to think about. How can you, my formatting's gone a bit funny there. How can you differentiate between international customary law and international treaty law? And secondly, we covered this a little bit previously, discuss how the UDHR is effective even though it is not legally binding. So the key word there is discuss. That means I want a paragraph out of you. Have a go at that. Get the people next to you to have a read and give you some feedback. Until next time, thanks for listening.